Hello, you're watching Telesur. This is from the south, from Quito, Ecuador. I'm Carla Gonzalez. Let's begin. Following the G20 summit in Argentina, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan is on an official tour of Latin America. After a stop in Paraguay, he arrived in Venezuela early on Monday, where he's set to meet President Nicolás Maduro. Both leaders will reportedly sign several agreements and hold a joint press conference. This is the first visit to Venezuela by a Turkish head of state. We continue in Venezuela as the December 9 municipal elections approach. The president of the National Electoral Court has confirmed that preparations are running smoothly.
So far, we have already executed 85% of the process for the election, particularly the delivery of machines. We finished the production of all material necessary, and voting machines are already going out to the regions. On Tuesday, we will go to schools, and by Friday, we will install electoral tables. So, if anything is missing, we have until Saturday to correct it. All in all, by Friday, we will have all our tables ready for Sunday 6 a.m. The Electoral Bureau, as established by the law.
I will move along. United States Border Police have arrested and detained members of the migrant caravan who crossed the U.S.-Mexico border between Tijuana and San Diego on Sunday. Thousands of migrants from Central America attempting to enter the United States to seek asylum have been stranded at the border for weeks now. They are trying to escape poverty and violence in their home countries.
We are going to try it because that's what we came for, to cross the border and achieve the American dream. We all wish to be there.
Members of this caravan were recently transferred by bus to a shelter miles away from the border in a dangerous neighborhood of Tijuana. The temporary shelter that we can see in this picture at the Benito Juárez sports complex has been shut down by authorities. Officials will no longer be offering food and medical care at the facility. Thousands of migrants have stayed at the shelter, which became unsanitary following heavy rains and flooding. But many are refusing to move to this new shelter because it is located in one of the most dangerous parts of Tijuana. Some say the new location stands in the way of their efforts to request asylum as a collective. Instead, they are camping outside the closed shelter. And a group from the migrant caravan is on hunger strike, hoping to pressure the U.S. government to expedite their asylum requests. Our correspondent Alina Duarte has more.
We continue here in the border city of Tijuana, a few meters away from the border crossing known as El Chaparral. Here, 15 migrants are holding a hunger strike which began on November 29th. They are demanding that the government of the United States receive their asylum requests in a shorter period of time. There are hundreds more who also send their asylum requests. However, authorities don't have the capacity of processing the requests in a timely manner, making things more difficult for the migrants.
That was our correspondent Alina Duarte from Mexico. And after being sworn in on Saturday, Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador and his first official act in government is a program to address the migrant crisis. It will include a coordinated operation between the three levels of government and also with its Central American neighbors. The plan will include a review of shelters and the reinforcement of security measures around Central America and within Mexico. On Saturday night, López Obrador said that the provision of basic supplies and a decent place to stay would be necessary. Honduran President Juan Orlando Hernandez has been accused of leading an alleged criminal network that embezzles public funds. During the testimony of Fernando Suarez, one of the accused in the corruption scandal known as Pandora, he implicated the president and his late sister as the masterminds behind the embezzlement. This was allegedly take place during Hernandez's tenure as President of Congress. Suarez also asked that he and his family be protected, given that they've received threats from the president's brother, who was recently arrested in the U.S. on drug trafficking charges. In Chile, one of the former police members involved in the murder of Mapuche activist Camilo Catrillanca has claimed that he was forced to lie and give false testimony. Carlos Alarcón said during a video shared on social media that there are facts from the case that haven't yet come to light. He denies having acted as a criminal during the raid on Temucuicui on November 14, and highlighted that he does not want the national police to be tarnished by this scandal.
Some things are yet to come to light. Those of you that know us know we do not act like criminals. You know none of us are criminals. There are people who force us to lie, to give false testimony, and we have become the worst of the worst, the evil of society.
Coming up, we have more stories, but we'll be back with more.
Telesur brings you special interviews with social and political personalities. Monday, from Washington. Tuesday, from Mexico. Wednesday, from Caracas. Thursday, from Quito. Friday, from Havana. Analysis about our continent's reality. Weekdays, only on Telesur.
And we're back. The mayor of Asunción district in Cajamarca, Peru was murdered on Sunday night. Manuel Vigo Muñoz was murdered in the town square where he was out with his wife. He was ambushed by two people on a motorcycle who fired at him point blank. His wife was injured during the attack, but her condition was not being made public. Vigo Muñoz had previously received death threats. And the student strike in Colombia continues and has reached its 55th day. Students have organized 2 new strikes to protest against a lack of investment in public universities. On Thursday, they will have one, and another one will be held next week. They reject what they call insufficient proposals by the government of Iván Duque to resolve this issue. According to union members, there's still hope that they will reach an agreement to increase their budget. They said that the marches will continue at 32 public universities across the country. President Duque has demanded that former FARC guerrillas stop using representatives at the Special Jurisdiction for Peace. Duque criticized that some senior members of the FARC party continue to speak through their lawyers instead of appearing in person in front of the special court. Colombia's constitutional court will make a decision on what to do with all the FARC's assets in the upcoming days. Elsewhere in Colombia, 2 indigenous leaders from the Agua indigenous community have been killed in the southern department of Nariño. Armed men shot Héctor Garcia and his son Arturo Garcia. The later one was elected as a governor of the local indigenous reservation on the previous night. According to the Colombian National Indigenous Organization, 12 indigenous leaders have been killed in the same municipality so far. Bolivian President Evo Morales has said that the United States is blackmailing Bolivia with warnings of a financial blockade.
The United States say that international organizations are not going to finance the Bolivian government, which is a threat. It is blackmail. But let's review our history. In 2002, when I was a presidential candidate for the first time, what did the US say? Evo Morales is the Andean bin Laden. They call us Taliban coca producers in order to scare the Bolivian people.
The coalition of left-wing parties in Uruguay has held its 7th Congress and approved nominees for presidential candidates for next year's election. 4 candidates were approved to stand in internal elections to decide who will be the official presidential candidate of the Uruguayan left. Around 1,500 delegates discussed policies that the left will propose in what could be their 4th consecutive government. The party is committed to achieving gender equality and strengthening the social care system, as well as environmental sustainability.
I think it's a good Congress. 1,500 participants in a country of 3 million inhabitants is a political force that raises the unity of the left. We debate, the left is built by the debate of ideas.
It's a feature of all of us who ever get together to a base committee. The difference of doing politics, the left has a way of doing politics which I think must be maintained, which is to summon the people to organize in the territory.
We live in the age of knowledge. This implies more and more how a country is rich or poor, according to its capacity to generate knowledge, to add value, and scientific technological development, which implies the challenge of an education of excellence.
More than 20,000 Cuban doctors developed their training in Brazilian universities that were part of the More Doctors program. Let's find out how they trained.
Brazilian lecturers and trainers recognize that the Cuban doctors have a wealth of international experience and have already specialized in particular areas. They're undertaking further professional development.
There is respect for humanity, diversity, and people. That's what makes them different. That's not taught in medical school. It's a human and civil process in Cuban education, in their political and social education about the need to care for human beings. When they speak about solidarity, people don't understand if they haven't experienced living in Cuba.
Brazilian President-elect Jair Bolsonaro soon cast doubt on the professionalism of Cuban doctors, and in particular, the quality of their qualifications.
We had the opportunity to offer specialization courses at the main medical universities in Brazil. During 5 years of collaboration, more than 20,000 Cuban doctors have been approved and were certified to practice medicine here in Brazil.
We were trained in Brazil by Brazilian professors, both in the language and in medicine, and if you didn't pass, you couldn't get into the More Doctors program.
The doctors graduated from the Latin American School of Medicine in Havana, which has been training doctors for 2 decades, and they recall their experience there.
It was a fantastic experience to work with them for the exchange of experiences and knowledge. They were professionals with experience from other countries, on other missions. It was very good to learn from them and to watch how affectionately they deal with patients.
Under the More Doctors program, the collaboration between Brazil and Cuba allowed both nations to mutually benefit. Brazilian patients were treated with compassion by the most experienced and skilled doctors, made possible by further training available to them.
And the G20 summit in Buenos Aires has ended, with China's President Xi Jinping making some of the most significant diplomatic progress. The Chinese president agreed with his U.S. counterpart, Donald Trump, to declare a temporary truce in their escalated trade war. Trump decided to restrict planned tariffs on Chinese goods, while the Chinese president promised to buy more U.S. products. Xi also agreed to deepen trilateral cooperation with Russia and China. During the summit, the Russian and Turkish presidents agreed on a series of measures to comply with the demilitarized zone agreement in the Syrian province of Idlib. Vladimir Putin and Recep Tayyip Erdogan agreed that not all extremists are meeting the demand to leave. According to the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, they will work with Turkey to ensure that the agreement is enforced and prevent armed groups from breaking it. The Syrian armed conflict dates back to March 2011, and Idlib is one of the last rebel-held areas. Social organizations in Argentina took to the streets to reject the presence of the world's most powerful leaders and their neoliberal policies.
Peoples from around Argentina and around the world gathered in Buenos Aires to take to the streets in demonstrations against the G20 summit. They took on the task of confronting the world's most powerful.
This People's Summit aims to let them know that they are in fact reinforcing the attacks on the world's working population. Macri has said that he wants to discuss how this government can advance with labor reform. He's putting that ahead of youth and also ahead of workers. It seems that for them, this is the only way that has occurred to them as a way to get out of this capitalist crisis. Of course, they are going to fail.
Their protests were reflected on hundreds of banners and posters that said no to the G20, down with the International Monetary Fund, and Trump and other imperialist leaders out. Protesters marched in defiance of threats by the Argentine government, despite the government's warnings that it would repress protesters.
In a city that has been emptied and militarized, it's very important that people demonstrated to say to those who think they own the planet that we don't want a world where the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. We don't want a world where people have to go from country to country looking for work and trying to find their way out of hunger. We don't want them to continue to make plans which worsen the situation. That's why we are here on the streets.
More than 22,000 security policemen were mobilized in order to shield the capital of Argentina. Despite the difficulty of reaching the city's downtown, the protests exceeded all expectations. Activists and people from all over the world came to Buenos Aires to be present and march against the most powerful.
This is a very important and momentous mobilization for workers because this G20 is going to discuss the future of work, but workers aren't invited to the discussion. This is why I say G20 out.
Here we have the social movements and workers of Latin America to tell the world that another world is possible, and that the strategy lies in Latin America unity and the peoples of the world.
More than 100 social organizations marched to the perimeter of the National Congress, where a document rejecting the G20's leader forum was read aloud. Their message was no to the model of looting and exclusion that concentrates more and more resources in fewer hands and forces people of the world into hunger.
In Guatemala, Mayan Quechua people traveled to the capital of the country over the weekend to demand that the lands that they were taken from them deceitfully be returned.
Ancestral authorities and Maya Quechua people from northern Guatemala traveled 400 kilometers to the Supreme Court. 2 years have passed since they presented a legal action in which they demand that the lands that they have been living in for centuries be returned. In 1905, they were taken away by the municipality.
There are almost 16,000 people living in these 36 communities. The government can't do this. We are making the claim before the Supreme Court so that they give us property titles.
According to the Quechua, 36 areas of land have been taken over by the municipality of Chiniqué in the last century. The action was conducted without previous consultation and with the approval of the dictatorship of the time. They affirm they have given evidence to the Supreme Court to prove that their ancestors have lived there since the 17th century.
We have the concrete basis of our history. In 1785, our ancestors and our grandparents were already living here, and we have all the evidence. We come from generations of Quechua people. We were born here, and we will die here.
Cases like this, in which indigenous populations claim the right to their ancestral lands, which were taken away from them deceptively, still dominate the country's courts. The majority are land extensions which were purchased from the Spanish crown.
This conflict is shared because they took lands away using the laws of the time, legally displacing the land's communities through corrupt policies. There have been many conflicts today that agricultural institutions haven't been able to resolve.
The Maya Quechua people say they will not allow others to take away what belongs to them, and that they inherited the lands from their ancestors for future generations. They require property titles in order to have legal ownership of the place where they live.
We're taking one last break, but stay with us.
an occasion to enjoy the cultural diversity that defines our South American essence. Come along to find out the story behind these personalities, traditions, and artistic expressions that unite us as a whole. Real Lives, Friday, only on Telesur.
Thank you for joining us again. Hundreds of people in Australia have protested against Myanmar leader Aung San Suu Kyi, who is in the country to attend a special Australian-Asian summit. The protesters accused Suu Kyi of being party to the persecution of Rohingya minorities in Myanmar. Nearly 700,000 Rohingya Muslims have fled the country since Myanmar launched a crackdown on insurgents 6 months ago. Many described cases of arson, murder and rape at the hands of soldiers and mobs in the majority Buddhist country.
The situation in Burma wasn't this bad before Suu Kyi came into power. The Rohingya have been affected more after she took control. Before, we were tortured, we weren't allowed to work or move independently. We were under a lot of scrutiny, but at least we could live.
The far-right Vox party in Spain has won 12 seats in parliament during the elections in Andalusia. It's the first time the far-right has managed to win so many seats since the country's return to democracy in the late 1970s. Socialists received the most votes but failed to secure an overall majority. As nationalism sweeps through the country, popular parties on the left are struggling to maintain their grip. About 25,000 people have protested in the Georgian capital of Tbilisi, rejecting the outcome of the country's presidential election. The winning politician Salome Zurabishvili was backed by the ruling party and is set to become Georgia's first female president. But her main opponent said the election was a criminal farce and called for snap parliamentary elections. Opposition parties are considering challenging the results on court. Junior doctors in Zimbabwe have gone on strike over what they are calling substandard conditions, low salaries and shortages of basic medicines and equipment. However, a senior government official has described the strike as ineffective and claimed that health institutions across the country are functioning normally. The doctors are complaining that their salaries are being eroded by hyperinflation that is gripping Zimbabwe. They argue that their salaries are almost worthless and have demanded that they get paid in US dollars. 15 people have been killed in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo in clashes between the National Army and rebels that are loyal to a former army general. A military spokesperson said clashes in the east of the country killed 12 rebels and 3 soldiers. The country hasn't experienced a peaceful transition of power since 1960 and will hold presidential elections that are crucial in this month. Now let's take a look at other stories making headlines around the world.
Qatar has announced that it will pull out of the Organisation of Petroleum Exporting Countries, or OPEC, next year, in order for the country to focus on natural gas production. Energy Minister Saad Al-Kaabi told a media conference on Monday that the country has informed OPEC of its decision to leave the organisation. OPEC is dominated by Saudi Arabia, which since June 2017 has led a bloc of countries in imposing a blockade on Qatar.
The state of Qatar has decided to withdraw its membership from the Organisation of Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, effective January 2019. This decision was communicated to OPEC this morning.
A star-studded concert has been held in South Africa to mark 100 years since the birth of late South African anti-apartheid icon Nelson Mandela. The concert, dubbed the Global Citizen Festival, was graced by celebrated musicians and led by United States singer Beyoncé. The concert is part of a project that aims to eradicate poverty, hunger and gender inequality.
I'll never forget to be part of something where the young generation are getting to learn about the great man himself, Nelson Mandela, in what he wanted and what he taught us, who he was, what he sacrificed for us, and what he wanted to achieve, which was ending the poverty in 2030. It's amazing that now through music, through this event, they can all understand that they can take action. They are a global citizen, they have a voice, and they can use it in the right way.
The Israeli government has ordered the country's director of Human Rights Watch to leave the country within 2 weeks for what the government calls promoting a boycott against Israel. The Interior Ministry announced that it has terminated the residency and work permit of Omar Shakir, who is currently the director of Human Rights Watch in Israel and Palestine. Israel has recently intensified its clampdown on human rights organizations that speak out against its occupation of Palestine.
So the proffered reason is support for boycotts, but the reality is this is a decision to muzzle Human Rights Watch and to silence criticism of Israel's poor rights record.
And that brings us to the end of this news program. But as you know, our website has all of this information at telesurenglish.net. And we're also on social media. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter. I'm González. Thank you for watching Telesur, connecting the Global South.